Now, Edgar is in Dover, but you didn't mean to be there. Is that correct, Edgar? Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks. No, at 20 to midnight last night, the power went off. I live just behind Heathrow, Hounslow West.
Right.
I called 105 at 10 past 1 to report a power cut, but they
I'm so
already
sorry. What
knew.
is 10? Every day is a school day. What is 105?
So if you call 105, you can report a power cut. If
How did
there's
you know that?
it happens more often than you think around that area.
Well, just because you're smarter than me, it doesn't make you a better person. But anyway, go on to why you then went to Dover.
So I live under the flight path, really. So by 4:30 in the morning, when I didn't hear the planes flying over, I checked and I saw that the airport was closed and bought a ticket on a ferry, put up an ad on BlaBlaCar, and I mean, in about 2 hours, I filled my car with 3 people to share.
Sorry, you put up an ad on BlaBlaCar?
Yes, so BlaBlaCar
I
is...
mean, how do you know all these things?
I just experienced living in the area. I mean, BlaBlaCar, I like the idea, offsetting carbon, sharing the ride, people to talk with.
Okay, yeah, okay.
So
you've got a full car of people you're taking to the ferry port in Dover to get to Calais, right?
all the way to Paris. That was my destination.
And you're then driving BlaBlaCar to Paris?
Yes.
Oh, this is incredible. You couldn't go a bit further south, could you?
So I got 3 very happy people that were able to get in the car because there's nothing. I think Eurostar is going to be crazy as well.
Yeah,
all the people trying to get across.
Let me ask you this. Is it work you have to be there for or a family event? Because you're obviously a very determined individual.
My cousin just had a baby, so so I'm playing it up for The Godfather. So I want to make sure I'm there.
Oh, well done. When is it? When what do you have to be there?
I have to be there today. Well, I was planning to be there today, fly today and stay for the weekend. So
is there a ceremony? Or there's not a christening or anything?
No. Just being born. And,
right. So it's a new baby. Oh, well, that shows tremendous resolve. And best wishes. Where are all your friends? Where are all the They're all just locals, are they? All just West Londoners?
All 3 are French. All three are French. So BlaBlaCar is pretty big there, So.
Okay. All right. Well, safe drive. What time's your ferry?
I'm on the ferry. It's leaving in about at 10 past 9. But I just wanted to mention one thing, having lived there. Those flights are not allowed to fly between about midnight and 4:30, 5:30 in the morning. So there is not going to be midnight. People can be assured there's not going to be any flights until tomorrow, way late in the morning, because the airport has limited operating hours.
Have a safe ferry crossing. Good luck seeing the baby, and, real endeavour. Safe travelling with your French friends.
So I just want to say, I think it's quite a British trait to be miserable. I think it's something that we just accept, right?
Isn't it?
Every day of our lives, we see everything in grayscale. There's not much colour going around. And even when, you paint a wall red, and it's just a shade of grey at the end of the day, But also, I think what the country needs is something to unify us again. I remember the Euros was, what a time to be there. Everyone was just together. There wasn't really much talk of politics or anything. It was just about winning, united as a country. And I feel like we've lost that a little bit. And, talks with politics, with religion. I think there's, every day there's a new excuse for people to disagree with each other. And I also think there should be more social things to do that don't involve alcohol, because we don't have any beaches or stuff like that. I think everything has to be in a bar or in a place that has alcohol.
That's interesting, Aaron. You think our
so
relationship with alcohol is part of what's making us unhappy?
Yeah, because every social situation or interaction involves alcohol. We sort of use that to fund our happiness. But when you don't have it, you sort of go back to...
There's a bit of chicken and egg here, isn't there? Because is it the case that drinking is making us unhappy, or are we drinking so much collectively because we're all miserable in the first place?
Yeah, I think we're drinking socially and then feeling happy from it, and then when we're not intoxicated, we don't feel the happiness. And I feel like we should be able to socialise and feel the happiness without anything added to it. So then when the alcohol does wear off, you're still feeling happy, But I feel like, I think the main thing should be something to unify us, like a task for the country to achieve or something like that. But I mean, when you turn on the news nowadays, there's nothing really positive anymore. I feel like news shows should have sections where they talk about something positive and what people have achieved and stuff like that.
Well, you're talking about, it goes back to what I was touching on a moment ago, division. This country feels more and more divided. And you're right, there are moments when we sort of, we feel like we're coming together. The pandemic was one, the London Olympics was one, the Euros maybe was another one, World Cup. But they're sort of fleeting and fragmentary, aren't they? They don't last very long. And then we go back to hating each other and screaming at each other on the streets and berating each other in pubs and wherever we encounter people.
Exactly, and from the point of view of a young person, I would say I feel like a lot of young people nowadays are sort of accepting the fate that they might not be able to get the jobs that they wanted and might not be able to pursue the kind of things that they want to. I mean, when a young person turns on the news and sees that the economy is dropping and opportunities are lesser, I feel like they're just sort of slightly. And imagine you're in the middle of a university degree and you've got 2 years left. You've already paid, You've already forked out the money, and you know that it's probably not going to amount to anything. You're probably going to go into a career that has nothing to do with what you just studied and paid for those 3-4 years.
I buy that, Aaron. Of course I do. And you've heard me say time and time again, and I'll carry on saying it, that the plight of young people in this country is getting worse and worse. But you look at the countries that are happier than us. I mean, no disrespect to these countries at all, but the young people in Lithuania and Costa Rica and even Ireland, Slovenia, the Czech Republic, do they really have it better than young people in Britain?
I think when you look at in Britain, people could see the opportunities. I mean, they can see what they could do.
So it's the inequality.
But are stopped from doing it. In other countries, they accept the fact that there's opportunities that aren't there, and it's just not going to happen. And they just like, I'll just make do and just focus on myself. But when you sort of dangle the carrot in front of young people, but then tell them you can't have it, that sort of, that really wears them down.
It's the inequality. It's the fact that young people with master's degrees in quantum physics are having to drive around doing minimum wage jobs in the pouring rain in the dead of night, while the people they're delivering their food to or driving around in their cars are absolutely raking it in on 100 or 200 times their salary. It's that gulf, isn't it? The huge discrepancy between the lives that many people are living and the lives that some other people are living, which in places like Finland and Denmark and Iceland, you just don't get on the same scale. They are far more equal. So there's far less resentment.
We read these stories, these fairy tales to our kids, and we read them in a neutral way.
Yeah.
Now, you then in the next year, school says, we're going to put on a production of Snow White. Now, in that school production, what does the school do? Does the school say, no, it cannot be a black lead? And then that starts the spiral of unintended racism. You can't do that. You can't be a lead. You're not expected to be a leader. And then it goes on and perpetuates through society. So, in my opinion, whoever's the best, if a director has an artistic view or decides they want to do something different, then they should be allowed to do so. Whether it's a Shakespeare play, I mean, if you take Macbeth hasn't traditionally only been played by Scotsmen. That's the role, even though the story is about Scottish monarchs.
I get the point, Norman, but can't we have a situation where if there are other plays in schools that people are doing, then they can choose other? I mean, I think theatre for me is slightly different anyway than actually a film. I don't know why. I've always felt that in a theatre you're suspending reality anyway. I mentioned before in one of my programs I watched the Lehman trilogy, and one of the three Jewish brothers was played by a black guy, and it didn't really affect me at all because the whole thing is suspended anyway. I mean, you're in the theatre, the whole thing's it's not reality.
But as black people, we have to. But as black people or people of minority, we have to suspend that reality from the moment we're born and live in this country. We're suspending that because everything we read, a majority of what we see. I mean, I grew up in the 60s and 70s, so I know things are quite different. But we have to. I mean, I'm a scientist, and I grew up watching programs with white scientists, but being a scientist. Whereas, such as Doctor Who, for example, it was like, wouldn't it be great to be a scientist? Now Doctor Who's a black guy. I would hope that doesn't put off white people from thinking, actually, I would like to be a
No, of course not. But in a fairy tale, Norman, and you said it at the beginning, it's a fairy tale. So why not just leave the fairy tale in its original form? Why would that be hampering black or Asian or any other person of colour becoming a leader because Snow White's played by someone with pale white skin?
because people see that as the lead. That's the
yeah, but there are loads of other films and things, Norman.
There aren't, though.
There are loads of them. Bridgerton. I mean, there's loads of stuff.
No, there aren't that many. There aren't that many that people relate to. Yes, I mean, there's some modern films now and some lead actors, the Denzel Washingtons and so on.
Yeah.
And he's played Shakespeare roles.
Yeah.
And people have had issues with a double Oscar winner playing a major role. So it's, I mean, we've got to, I mean, I was reading the paper yesterday and there's this discussion now about Maro Itoje being the Lions captain.
Mm-hmm.
The next Lions. I thought, my goodness, that's real progress. Can you imagine a black guy leading the British Lions on an overseas tour? For some people, that's a no-go. That's a non.
Yeah, but that's
probably
about,
wouldn't accept it.
But that's about sport. It's not a fairy tale. Norman, I understand your point.
Sport is fairy tale, Ali. Sport is Norman, I think you put a point across very, very clearly, very eloquently. I don't agree with it, as I didn't agree with my sister on this point either. But I'm glad for your call.
Oh, Nick, I've got to take a few deep breaths here because I'm so incensed at what's being talked about the autism. Firstly, let me say what this boy's done is horrific, and there are no two ways about that.
Absolutely.
Your last caller, and I'm afraid you've done it as well, Nick, highlighting autism as if
respectfully, sir, I'm only doing it because counsel said, the defence counsel said so. I'm asking. I don't know. I don't have it, and I don't have anyone close in my life who has it, so I don't know, sir.
Okay, well, let me tell you. I'm
Please.
the father of a non-verbal autistic boy.
Right.
Can I just say, yes, you're talking about the defence counsel. Of course he's going to use some kind of flaky excuse. The gentleman that you had on earlier, who prompted me to call, came out with a few statements such as the problem with autism, which, again, is very, very offensive to me as a parent of an autistic child. He's not a problem.
Okay.
He's a boy with autism. It's not a problem. Secondly, autistic people have no empathy. They don't care about people. That's just unbelievably...
I don't think Dr. Holmes said that. Sorry, Keith, I'm sorry. I think, what I heard Dr. Holmes says that psychopathic people have that. And this young man, I don't think he attributed that to his autism.
He did actually say, he said autistic people...
I'm sorry, sir, I misheard. I do apologise if that's what he said.
Yeah.
Obviously, you feel it very keenly because of your boy.
Yeah.
Okay, so
the problem with autism is, autistic people do not have a lot of empathy. They don't care about people. They don't care about being around people.
And what is the reality? Might I ask, how old is your boy?
He's 12, nearly 13.
What is the reality? So you have an almost teenager with autism. What is the reality with your son?
My son is a beautiful, lovely, caring little boy who is such a happy, happy soul. If everything in his life is good, and he is in his routine, he's happy. He doesn't have a malicious or vicious bone in his body.
Right.
Autism and evil just don't go together. No. Anybody who has or knows autistic people will verify this. They just don't have it in them. I'm honestly, Nick, I'm fuming. I cannot.
You're not alone.
Believe that the two of them.
Karen is saying, I'm furious and upset. Christopher is saying, thank goodness this man has called in. This is lies, lies, lies. He's right to be telling you the truth. So there's a lot of support for what you're telling me, Keith.
Yeah, well, like I said, we have, because my son goes to a special school.
Yeah, sure.
And there are other children in his class who we are very close to their parents. And we all know this. We all feel exactly the same about our autistic kids. We call them superheroes because they really are superheroes. They are very, very special people, and autism is something that...
Let me ask you this then, lastly. When you hear in the case of this young man, when you hear that the Southport killer was driven in part by autism, how do you react when you hear these stories almost...
Nick, you're doing it again.
But that's what comes out in court. That's what comes out in court. That's what these people say.
Doesn't make it right.
No, that's why I'm asking.
It right.
But Keith, I just said, when you hear that The defence for these people is they are driven by autism. How do you react? That's what I'm asking you.
I react very, very angrily because it's nonsense. It's absolutely rubbish. No, autism wouldn't drive somebody to do something like that.
But that's why I'm getting your reaction, sir. Do you see?
Yeah, well, you are getting my reaction.
And I'm pleased.
I hope you realise how serious and how angry people like myself are about this.
I can hear
because it shouldn't be tolerated, and it shouldn't be said. The defence counsel are saying it because they're struggling and grasping it at a defence, and they're using something like autism, which is disgusting.
But it's only because someone like you, who's spoken so passionately and with such love for your boy, that we hear the reality, Keith. If I didn't say that, you would never have phoned me.
No, you're absolutely right, which is why I wanted to phone you, and I'm so glad, and thank you for letting us get this out.
Not at all. No, it's completely the other way. Thank you.
I'm the head of participation at the third largest regional theatre in the country, Mayflower Theatre and Studios here in Southampton. I've spent 20 years of my life professionally about engaging young people, schools, community groups with live theatre.
Wow, okay.
And I see it firsthand, front and centre, how this has a major impact on people's lives. And I think us who work in the theatre industry, definitely in the creative industries, get really, really tired that we constantly have to prove our worth or prove why we're existing. It seems that each government, Labour came in and kind of promised that they were going to do something about it, and at the moment it feels like we're a bit concerned that it's falling on deaf ears. If you want to have the financial argument, so in 2022, 124.6 billion was contributed into the economy from the creative industries. It's something that is very much the lifeblood of this country. I think it's something when people think of Britain, they definitely think of the creative industries, and definitely in terms of like massive theatre productions. And we can see, I can see personally, and I have seen over the last 20 years, the impact that has in people's lives. And one thing, just to pull out, what I think drama and theatre does really gives young people is their appreciation of empathy.
Yes.
To be able to see and perceive the world in someone else's eyes. To explore the world from someone else's position, to walk the world in someone else's shoes. We live at this moment in time in a very complicated world, social medias, and I think it's very hard for young people to be young people today. And to be able to be, in a lesson or in a theatre and exploring something and thinking about from certain perspectives and considering what it is to be a human being is, it's an essential skill for young people.
I remember watching a documentary about what tribal existence would have looked like before the introduction of, what we would call civilization, how the earliest human beings would live. And arts was a part of how they lived, whether that was through storytelling or music or dance. It was something that was done every day. And that, to me, suggests that it's a human need. I don't know whether you would agree with that actually we all need some kind of artistic expression.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's what it is to be a human being. It's what it is to express yourself. It's what it is to, to think about the world that you're living in. And you can express that in many different forms, whether it's music, whether it's art, whether it's dance, whether it's drama. It questions what it is to be a human being. And that's why we really love to go to the theatre. Because it's a live experience. It's a communion between the performer and the audience. There's a really great quote from Alfred Jarry, who wrote Ubu Roy, which is, you enter the theatre as an individual, but you exit as an audience. It's a collective experience, and I feel like from a school's perspective, it's essential. It's essential for young people to start to be free and express themselves. It shouldn't feel like an added extra. You know, it should be the very core of a curriculum. You know, like lots of young people have to sit down every day where we are in an education sector driven by Michael Gove around a knowledge-based curriculum, you know. But where is the opportunity to get up on your feet and to not have to pass an exam or to not have to, you know, think about grading, but actually to think about what it is to be a living, breathing human being. How can I express myself? How can I develop confidence? And looking at all the theatre, you know, projects that I've delivered over the last 20 years, you know, we look at evaluating those projects. All the time you have people, you know, young people who their confidence grows, their sense of self-worth grows, the actual human connection. You know, a lot of young people are on phones constantly. Like, we switch the phones off, they're not there. And actually, you know, they're living, breathing what it is to be a human, to listen, to think about the world they're living in, to think about human experience, and to question things. You know, I'm from a very working class background in Ireland, the council estate in Ireland. None of my parents were into theatre, but it was going to a pantomime for the first time that actually made me feel something. And I was like, oh, I would like to kind of find out more about that. And I joined a drama class, and you really, really grew that confidence. You know, if we look at, you know, even like what the workforce are looking for, the workforce is looking for people who are innovators, you know, like who have ideas, who think outside the box. All the creative pursuits that we can get involved in nurture all of that. And I think, just going back to my first point around, I think we're getting really tired that we've just got to keep justifying this. The professor that wrote the report, you know, that you had on earlier, like, you know, how many more reports have we got to write in order to, you know, to justify our existence? We need to accept that this is part of our human life, and this is about nurturing young people and developing them. So for us to become, like, you know, to have a more healthier country, have healthier relationships, and the arts really, really helps with that.
Patrick, you have articulated brilliantly all of the benefits. And I hear you, by the way. I hear your frustration when somebody is constantly asking you to justify. In the field of mental health, it's businesses asking what's the ROI, return on investment for me supporting my employees' mental health. And you almost want to be like, just do it for the karma points, mate. But actually, there is a lot of robust evidence to show that if you look after the mental health of your employees, you retain them better, they work harder, there's a lack of something called presenteeism, which means that you're there physically, but your mind is somewhere else. And it is great for the bottom line. And I think for those of us who work in these fields, that feels self-explanatory. So when you're asked to explain it can be difficult.